Shamika, and I am back. I am officially back from a much needed vacation. The weather is nice, and I'm here to hang out with you guys. Don't mind the mess behind me. It's just you haven't finished everything you need for the vacation post cleanup. So, I just want to give everybody a chance. We had an amazing conversation recently on our office hours. So I wanted to continue that conversation with you guys here on YouTube and get your insight and take. One of the nice things about owning a healthcare staffing agency business is that you kind of do things differently depending on your circumstances. So let's get a chance to jump in. If you're coming in on our Facebook group, definitely feel free to let us know where you're coming from. If you don't have a YouTube channel, that's okay. You can always just subscribe here and create your own channel at a later date. But welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you guys who may not know who I am Shamika. I am the founder and creator of the NOSA group, and I am terribly excited because I've had a refreshing, rejuvenating week of vacation. So I am glad to be back in our social media communities and talking about a pretty good topic that I think will provide a lot of individuals some insight on the process and how to set your business up for success in the early stages. So if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. If you have any comments, I always love the conversations. I know you guys don't see me on here as much on the Facebook group, but I am reading the comments, and I feel like I'm one of those people where all the juicy stuff happens in the comments. So I'm definitely reading the comments and seeing what you guys have to say, as well as what your experiences have been. So I have dropped into the chat here in the chat in our Facebook group the actual topic that we're going to be talking about today. But just to kind of give you a little bit about what it is. First of all, we have office hours twice a month. So we had office hours this past Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. So if you have a question or you just want to get and hear other people's experiences, feel free to jump in. So it's from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. But sometimes or every so often, if we don't have any questions or we don't have a lot of questions, I'll pull a question from the group. So that's what we did this time. And the question from the group is coming from Taylor Green. Shout out to Taylor. And she's asking about that she is in a position to start her staffing agency, but has some questions around cold calling. And she actually had 3 questions, but we're going to kind of package it into one larger question. So her 3 questions were, do you manage all of your back office compliance related tasks yourself? Or do you recommend outsourcing it? And she referenced hiring an EOR, which is an employer record, or a lot of us refer to it as a back office or a professional employer organization. And there are some slight differences between those. And we'll definitely get into it in another video, or you can check out the video here below that talks more about what the difference is between a back office and a PEO, a provider, professional employer organization. Then the second part of our question, which touches on the compliance piece, is how do you ensure that your agency stays compliant? Especially since she's completed the initial stages, which would include getting your LLC with the state or registering with the state. She has insurance, professional and general liability. Typically, some other states have different requirements. She also has her workers' comp, but isn't sure about any other compliance related regulations. So how do you prevent lawsuits coming out or protecting your business, essentially, is what that question is about. And then the third part of the question is, how do you manage being a sole owner, worker of your agency when talking to potential clients or nurses? Do they know who you are? I'm thinking I would have to be doing it all, the recruiter, the payroll, the marketing. How do you juggle this? At what point do you start hiring help? So that's really what we're going to talk about here is how do you juggle it, when to hire help. And I am going to kind of give a little bit of perspective on the first question around do you recommend hiring a EOR, employer of record? And there's tons of them out there. So you guys have probably heard of some, whether you've seen them here on social media or been referred to other people from them. They provide a lot of the services that she mentions in the third part of her question around recruiter type services, payroll services, not so much marketing, but more accounting, payroll, and sometimes your insurance services. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what my experience was, and you can let me know in the comments what your experiences was and kind of the pros and cons of that, and then touch on how do you juggle this and when to hire help. So for us in the beginning, we did do all those things. Now take into consideration that we're two of us, and I have a previous background in human resources, so I'm familiar with doing some of those tasks. So I did the recruiting, I did the marketing, I did the social media, and my business partner did the payroll and accounting, and some of the compliance, some of the more insurance, business operational compliance things. So with that being said, it is a lot of work. And I'm not going to get on here on any level and begin to create an illusion that it's not a lot of work. And it's sometimes a lot of work, especially if you don't have experience with it. So, an example would be before there was iPhone, there was a flip phone or there was a track phone or, the big phone that we put on our ears or pagers. So the transition from that into what we now see as an everyday phone was a lot for people at that time. So that's a huge transition. Even if you wanted to use all the features, it took a lot of time. So for those who created the phone, we're going to use Apple for this example, it wasn't as much of a transition for them because they had experience and exposure with it. So the reason I use that example is for us, because I had a background in human resources and I'm a second career nurse, I did not have to have such a large learning curve. I knew how to recruit, how to review resumes, set up interviews. I was comfortable with interviewing people, knowing about the different job sites and job boards that are out there that people can be found, or Facebook groups, which are really big in the healthcare community space. So those were things that I was comfortable with. I knew about running payroll or processing, accounting, some of the insurance related compliance, and some of the employment related compliances. So those were things that I already knew. As far as like marketing, things like that, I was familiar with it, but because it's not something that I did in my day-to-day job, it was something that I had to perfect and learn. So how do you do that? You can do it yourself. And a lot of that depends on how quickly you want to grow. And some of that should be included in your actual business plan. Like, how big do you want to be? Are you going to grow from 1 to 100 in 6 months? Or are you going to kind of keep it small to get a handle over it? So the main thing that I would say as far as should you or should you not is really based on how quickly are you going to grow your business and acquire employees and clients, and what that looks like from your business plan standpoint of view. The other piece would be, what do you want your business to do in the future? So I advise people when it comes to employer records or back offices and things of that nature to really do your research around what they provide. Is there someone that you either know or that you may have worked with that can provide that same service? So, like, is there a need? So, I tell people one of the positions that there's not necessarily a need for early on is a recruiter. You can be the recruiter. Um, we know, and I've read some of the statistics, that healthcare is a employee referral based business. So acquiring the applicant piece isn't as difficult or as challenging as many other industries. We just tell other people. We tell other people, if you have a strong employee referral network, that usually gets you a lot of people. That's what we use to kind of get and acquire a lot of our applicants. If people like to work for that agency, they're more than likely to share, hey, I work for such and such. I love them. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z. So how you structure your referral program can kind of assist you in that recruiter piece. Now, don't get me wrong, there still is a process of doing the interviews, processing applications, getting compliance paperwork, drug screens, and things like that. So that's definitely a piece of the recruiter compliance piece. Two, so once you identify the things that you could get someone to do, then you want to look at the numbers. So I'm really big on making sure that you look at the numbers and that the numbers make sense. So a lot of times these employees of records charge fees. So they charge a percentage, and it can range. I've seen 18 to 20%. I think the average is about 13, don't quote me, of what your business is generating in revenue. So whatever that number is, let's say it's $50,000, is that something that you can have someone do as a position for your business or that you can do for your business? And the last thing would be the terms. So when you typically join or sign contracts with employer records, a lot of the time you're locked into a contract for a period of time. So you're not signing like a 30-day contract or 1 month contract or a 90-day contract. It's usually a year. I encourage people to do no more than a year, mostly because you don't know how your business is going to do. I also encourage people to really thoroughly read through the contract because there could be terms in your contract that might generate fees. There might be, well, your business has to generate $10,000 a month, or for every employee that we have to run payroll on or off payroll, there's a fee. So most EORs have a la carte pieces, and sometimes it's more beneficial in the very beginning to have those services than to have the whole package that most of them would like for you to obtain. And for the whole package, that would look like what she was mentioning about they provide, compliance of employees, not so much a recruitment, but once you've identified a potential employee, they take them through the drug screening process, the background process, application, reference checks, all that type of stuff. They would be sometimes responsible for not so much scheduling, but running of the payroll. And then, receiving payment from your clients is usually a part. And then also many of them offer to business owners obtaining your workers' comp and your general and professional liability. And one of the things about that you want to kind of be careful about is kind of maintaining the integrity of your business. In that, are you indeed operating in the role of your business as the owner, or are you operating in the role as more of a super recruiter? So are your employees indeed your employees, or could it be a situation in which those individuals work for your EOR and those are the people that provide them the W-2, and in return they take a fee, right, for revenue generated, and then you get the balance. So that's why I said for that particular question, it was important to really think about what you want to do in the business, because for some people, long term, that doesn't work. It doesn't work to have a second company be the actual W-2 employee for your employees or employer. But for others, it may be a great idea because you don't want that additional responsibility, and maybe you don't have any intentions at that particular time to expand the business beyond yourself, right? So those are some things I would think about when you talk about like back office and stuff like that, and EORs and those types of things, so that you're clear as to what you're getting into, what they're doing, and then what you're receiving in return. So there's a lot of conversation in our group on some of the more popular back offices in the healthcare staffing space. That's a great place to kind of get a general idea, but I encourage people, do your research, Google these individuals that are reaching out to provide these types of services. Read over your entire contracts, no matter how long the contracts are. Make sure that you're not signing long-term contracts, which to me means anything more than a year, and mostly because you don't know how your business is going to do. So some of them have terms or caveats where you may end up having to pay them. So in those instances, you just have to be careful, as there could be some risk involved that you don't want to find out on the back end. How do I ensure that the agency stays compliant? So a big part of ensuring that the agency stays compliant is doing some of the initial things: registering with the state, paying your taxes, making sure you have insurance, workers' comp, unemployment payments, and things of that nature. But then there's also the second piece around like employment law, right? FMLA, EEOC, those types of things that are just federal law around hiring individuals, disciplining individuals, and then kind of maintaining and keeping in line any sort of policies and procedures that your organization has in place. So, how do you deal with situations where there's a medicine issue or missing medications, or if there's an incident at a facility? You want to have all those things in writing and in place, in a process that you or whoever the operations person is able to handle appropriately, as well as make sure that you document it appropriately. And also in those instances, not all of the laws around employment law go into effect until you reach a certain number of people, so a certain number of employees. So make sure that you kind of find that out ahead of time, so that once you're at that point, you're in compliance with: do you have to offer them health insurance? Do you have to offer them leave? As we've seen in some states where they're changing some of the rules. And then also understand that some of the employment laws are state specific, and then some of the employment laws are federal. So typically you have to comply with both. So you want to make sure that you're at least aware. SHRM.org, Society for Human Resources Management, is a good resource. ASA, American Staffing Association, is a good resource for some of those things as well. And then the last question, which kind of sums it up, is how do you juggle it all? How do you juggle it from the point of hiring somebody and maybe doing some of the activities on your own until you get to the point where you're ready to outsource some of those activities? And one thing to take into consideration is that in the beginning, you may or may not have to juggle it all. It's up to you and how you structure and identify roles and responsibilities in your organization. So it was two of us, so it was a partnership. So I had specific things that I was responsible for. My partner had specific things they were responsible for. But it, for us, wasn't until 6-9 months into the business that we decided to add help, just because we didn't have a number of employees, right? So we didn't have a tremendous number of employees that the process became unmanageable. And then two, we hadn't reached a place where we could identify, and this is really key, identify what that additional person would be doing, right? So until you're there, don't pay money to have someone do work that you're not sure that they need to be doing. Get to the point where you are clear, you have job descriptions, you have, responsibilities, chains of command, so that as you get to that place, you'll know, hey, okay, we're here. We're billing this number of hours, because that's also a factor. We have this type of workload. We want to spend more efforts or take more time on focusing on business development and maybe transition this business partner out of that role. That person has identified, this is the role of the recruiter and this is what the task they'll be doing. They've identified the compliance piece. Because when you lump everything together and you make the decision to start asking or start seeking out help or wanting help, whether it's virtually or in person, not having defined roles, tasks, and responsibilities and expectations will then become another job. So you don't want to put yourself in a position where, hey, I've hired this help, but because I wasn't prepared, Now I'm spending all of this time managing the person that's supposed to help me. So that's why I say for that last question, which is really a great question, and I think that's where a lot of people have hiccups, is in the beginning, identify what it is, create an organizational chart, create a job description, even if it's just a couple of lines, and also create the parameters around which you're saying yes. At this point, at the point that we're billing 300 hours a week, at the point that we have 15 staff or 10 staff members, whatever that looks like for you, really start to look and see where that person will be the best fit. So I'm a big proponent of, I'm not going to hire at this stage, at the early stage, which for me is less than 3 years, anyone who is doing business development for me. I'm always going to do that in the early stages. And like I mentioned, early stages, if you're in business for less than 3 years, that's still fairly early to me for healthcare staffing. So that's always going to be something that myself or my business partner or someone in our management team will do. That won't be outsourced. But can that individual do recruiting? Sure. Could they do scheduling? Of course. Could they be doing like compliance? Yes. But when you don't have a balance with that, so you don't have the job description, the expectations, performance evaluations in those roles, you'll be in proper training. You'll end up having to be pulled back into those things because either you weren't prepared to train them and kind of make that transition period make sense, or that individual may not be the best fit. So, and then the last part of her question was around um, the juggle. So, when you're ready to juggle and make the transition, you want to really think about where the business is going. So, if you're in year 4 or year 5, or maybe you had a growth spurt in the first 3 years, that is where you want to think about, as the owner, where do you want to be spending most of your time? And it's up to you, right? As a decision maker, do you want to be more involved with the business development piece? Do you want to be more involved with the growth? But or do you want to be more involved with kind of the developing of the staff? That's a personal decision. But at that stage, you also want to think about what's the most beneficial to your business. So if I'm an individual, and this kind of question has come up quite a few times in the group, and I'm looking to get into federal government or state or local government staffing in the healthcare medical space, I'm going to do that because that will require networking, that will require maybe a social media presence, because that way you're able to put a name to a face, a potential client can put a name to a face, and then have a more clear outline of what it is that you do, why you do it, or why they should work with you. So that really allows you as the key member in the business to find out what the process looks like so that you're able to communicate it to the people down the line. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with as far as kind of finding your place in your business and what makes sense. Like, hey, am I better on social media? Does that make more sense? Or could I be, which could be like a marketing type of role, or could I be more beneficial in the accounting piece or the numbers or making sure we're hitting our numbers? Or should I be more involved with the business development? Depending on what you decide and what that looks like is more of a you question, but making sure that you're making good and strong decisions around that is an ultimate, hey, what do I want to do with the business? Like, some people want to expand, some people have added CNA schools or CPR schools or different things like that. So that's something that you may or may not need to have your full attention or be a big part of what you're doing, which to me is different than if you were doing an expansion of your business into the federal, state, or local space. So those are different things. So like, you could hire someone to set up your CNA school, mostly because that's heavily regulated. It's a process that everybody has to go through. So it doesn't have as many unique pieces to it than if you're going to be involved in the bidding and working with potential larger contractors and things like that to obtain contracts for staffing. So, and it's a little bit less of a complicated process and has less variables. So, thank you guys so much. Feel free to drop your comments and any questions you have in the chat. As we go into May in the summer, we'll probably be having more of these office hours where I kind of take it from the group into office hours and then continue the conversation here on YouTube. If you haven't gotten a chance to go ahead and subscribe to our channel, please go ahead and do so. We're excited to have you here. We'll be dropping some more content this month as our topic is about marketing. We have talked about LinkedIn and we talked about social media, as well as putting together the right policies and procedures and why they're important. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our most talked about topic of all of our social media, and it's how to get yourself ready to market. Like, what do I need to do? What do I need to stop doing, start doing? And how do I evaluate my results? So that'll be some of the conversation we'll have as we go into the month of May. As always, thank you to all our new subscribers here on our YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook group. And if you want to join our Facebook group, if you go up to the right-hand side of our channel, we have a link there that'll allow you access into our free Facebook group. So there's no charge to access the Facebook group and get more content and information on the experiences of others. So if you don't know, we are an amazingly large social media group with people from all over the United States, and I enjoy the conversation. As I mentioned before, I love the conversations happening in the comments just to allow us to continue to connect with each other, get information, because much like nursing, healthcare staffing looks different in different states. The needs are different. Sometimes the titles and positions could be a little bit different. You know, some of the settings are different. So kind of connecting with someone where you can relate to, hey, this is how we do it here, really helps you through the process. We also have quite a bit of content on there that talks about the process of getting started and what those steps look like. So for the most part, the steps of getting started are there on the Facebook group, they're here on this YouTube channel, and they're also on our website, are very similar. It changes from state to state, so there may be some added requirements that you may need to know about. If you go to our website, you'll be able to click under resources and access our map where you can see the specific requirements as up to date as possible for those respective states. But take in mind that you want to do your research even before you get into those steps about, is there a need for an agency in the particular state that you're located, and go from there. Department of Labor are great resources. Your Commerce Department, your Small Business Development Center, your local SCORE are all great resources to kind of answer some of those questions around, does my state or area or region have a need for another agency? And does it make sense for my particular business to open up here? Or maybe it should open in a different state, or maybe I should consider operating off of a different niche. So I hope that helps everybody. Again, thanks for hanging out here. Feel free to chime in and give us your experiences in the comments. Again, don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for being a part of our community. I'll be chatting with you.